Thanks for joining us for our Wednesday webinar series. Today we're talking Shout Out to Grout. Thank you, Anne-Marie. Great headline. Hope you guys all had a great Memorial Day weekend. Remember why we have the Memorial Day weekend. And I wanted to take a second just to announce that we are picking back up, which is really exciting. We're getting back to our hours, our regular store hours, so late Wednesdays and open Saturday mornings. So just a quick plug on that to know that we are kind of making those baby steps back to, quote, normalcy. But as I mentioned, we're talking Grout today. Shout out to Grout. Again, my name is Garrett, Marketing Director for Contract Furnishings Mart. We have a very special guest, Mr. William White. He is the Field Marketing Specialist for the Western U.S. for Ardex Americas. Longtime friend of the program, and very excited just to bring you in and nerd out on some of this, this little thing that has such a huge impact on a tile installation.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think we're just going to start out. We're going to talk a few things. We're going to talk about the impact of grout. We're going to talk about the different classifications and what should go where. We're going to talk a little bit about maintenance. We're also going to talk about some caulking.
Yeah, expansion joints.
Yes.
Exactly.
So let's just dive right in. We're starting with this board right here. So this, believe it or not, is all the same mosaic, but they look completely different based on the grout color that was chosen.
Yeah, simply the grout has that much of an impact on the overall effect of the tile. So you can see here we actually have 3 different colors of grout, starting with a neutral, going to a contrast, an accent and a contrast. So what that does is you can really see how it can change the actual look of the tile based on just the grout.
And especially with, this has glass and metal incorporated.
Exactly.
The glass is what really changes, because you can look at these 2 glass pieces side by side, and that grout does, how the light hits it from the different angles into a piece of glass, that's where I see the big difference. When you have the same glass color to start with, but it completely changes whether you go neutral, matching, or contrasting.
Contrast.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And that's because glass is translucent, right? So it absorbs both from the face as well as the sides, and that's where we actually get that effect into the glass, that it can change the color of the glass. In addition, something that a lot of people don't think about is the setting material can sometimes change the overall effect of a glass tile as well. So we always want to use as white of a thin set as we can possibly get.
And same with natural stone too.
It can, you're right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So really, we just thought this was really cool to start with, and there's some different mosaics. There's plenty of stuff online. Really what we wanted to emphasize is the impact that grout has. So I know that people can spend a lot of time stressing over what color ends up going in, and some people wait until the tile is actually installed before they pick up their color.
And you have a lot of options from all the different manufacturers. Every manufacturer has multiple options in both the color of the grout as well as what kind or classification of grout. So we have just a couple of options here on the table, and you can see there's literally a rainbow of colors.
Now you can just avoid the duck colors here in general, not your big sellers, but obviously a lot of whites, grays, the generally neutral tones. Correct. Are going to dominate most applications, right?
Well, and grays are really popular right now, but we're starting to see the trend of vibrant colors are starting to come back, so we're going to start seeing some more vibrant grout colors come out.
Mm-hmm. Just keep in mind really what effect you want that grout to play. Do you want the tile to be the focal point? Do you want it to be a little bit more subdued? So you can match it, obviously people are still using a lot of the 3x6, 3x9 subway tile in white or gray. You can make those pop, you can make them fade away, really kind of whatever you want to accentuate.
Also, another time that you may want to use a contrasting color is when you have a pattern in the tile and you want to accent or showcase that pattern, that you do a herringbone or a chevron pattern in the tile. With a tone-on-tone grout, it kind of blends away, but if you do an accenting grout, now you can really actually show off and accent that.
Mm-hmm. Or keep in mind, if the tile has a pattern itself, like those encaustic tiles, maybe you want to match the base color, and so that it's not interrupting that pattern.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So again, grout, there's really no rules, which sometimes makes it more difficult.
More difficult.
Yeah. But there are a couple tricks. You mentioned to me earlier, because this cost is such a small portion of the overall project. If you're on the fence, maybe get a couple different colors.
Doing a mock-up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes, some owners, they don't want to make that decision until they're in the room with their lighting, their wall colors, their tile, because all of that can slightly change the overall effect of the tile. And so a little trick that I've done, we can make a mock-up, you know, simply like this and do a mock-up with a couple different colors. Another trick is you can also take dry grout and sprinkle it into the grout joints and then sweep it off the top, and that will be very, very close to what the finished grout would look like. And if they say, don't like either of those, you can just use a vacuum and suck it right out and start over.
Yeah, no harm, no foul.
Yep.
All right, cool. So if you have any questions on that, again, just kind of talking with the professional helps a lot. Using the resources online certainly helps. There are a lot of these you know, installed display samples that you can find online just to get a better idea before you make your decision.
And a lot of times your CFM sales professional is going to be able to help steer you in that direction because they have a lot of experience making those decisions as well.
Nice plug. We appreciate that. Okay, so let's get this out of the way. Want to talk about these different classifications because we see a few different fan decks here. They all have all the colors under the rainbow, basically. But we need to decide which type of grout, not just the color, right?
Exactly. So there are different ANSI classifications for grout.
And what does ANSI stand for?
American National Standards Institute. So all products have to fit in these certain criteria. And so, you know, starting out at the basic grout. So it used to be that we didn't have so many options. You had sanded grout and non-sanded grout. That's what you had. Non-sanded grout was for an 1/8 inch and smaller. Sanded grout was for an 1/8 inch and larger. Well, now, you know, as we get into these other grouts, you'll see that we developed a lot more classifications for these grouts. So our basic grout is an ANSI 118.6 grout. So it's going to be used typically commercial applications, large spaces, and oftentimes you can do a little bit larger joint. So like the FH grout here, which is a 118.6, it can actually do up to 3/4 of an inch grout joint.
Or if budget is your main concern, then obviously this is what's going to get the job done.
Absolutely, and it's worked for, you know, hundreds of years. Basic grout has worked.
But it is basic, and so you would still want to seal it. You have to do some additional topical,
exactly,
if you wanted it to perform better.
And that's where the advent of these high-performance cement-based grouts came in. So these are ANSI 118.7 grout, and what this has done is it's actually improved over a basic grout. So we have higher strength, higher compressive rate, more stain resistance. So it really is for a very nominal cost impact. Just a little more money, you actually get a much better grout. And so with these high performance or 118.7 grouts, we have two options here because now we have a non-sanded and a sanded grout. So,
and big reason for that is really what your medium is that you're grouting over.
Exactly. So, you know, as I just reach behind us here and I grab, you know, these couple samples, I wouldn't want to grout either one of these with a sanded grout at all. I would want a true non-sanded grout so that, you know, if I was concerned that this could scratch, we have options that it won't scratch. And most of the manufacturers have those available.
Is it just a more rounded, smoother polymer that
it's actually the aggregate, the sand itself. So these are sanded, and instead of having, you know, these typically have angular sand, and you know, the high performance cements typically have a more rounded sand, so it goes into a finer joint also. So these high performance can go down to a 1/16, you know, sometimes up to a 1/2 inch, and the non-sandeds can now go up to a 1/4 inch oftentimes. So a lot more variance, and so as you're designing your different decos and everything with tile, you're not limited to just your grout joint size anymore.
Gotcha. And then I guess you could even do like a small test if you had any concerns with it scratching as well, right?
Absolutely.
Always a good
Mix
idea.
up a small batch and do it, you know, on a scrap piece or something, and just rub it in to see if it had any negative effect. It's best to test.
And then they invented the single component grout, which has been great because really it's just super simple. It's a pre-mixed,
ready to go
out of the
open
bucket.
the lid up. You get some great features and benefits out of a single component grout. Now here we were talking about these ANSI standards. Currently there are no ANSI standards for the single components, but what you do get is you get stain resistance that is typically superior to cement-based grouts. Now the single components do have some limitations, you know, where they can be used as far as, you know, mortar beds and showers and exterior applications. They want to limit those, but single components are a great for a small increase in price, now you get even better results out of your grout.
Right. And sometimes one of the knocks on this is the cleanability of it as you're installing. But there are some nice tricks out there too. I mean, we stock the Blaze Haze Remover and those scrub pads to help with that. So if that's a concern, they have solutions out there as well.
Well, and that's where you contact the local rep, and they'll help you out with the best tips and tricks for using their product.
Talk about this one. This is the big boy.
Right. So
the
now,
of them all, right?
As we transition into epoxy grouts, most installers are resistant or hesitant for epoxy grouts. Now, epoxy grouts, there are actually two classifications for epoxy grouts. This is a 118.3, which is a true 100% solids epoxy grout. There is also a 118.8, which is a modified emulsion. So the modified emulsions are kind of like our single components, where they do have some limitations as far as where they can be used and so forth. Where the true 100% solids, they don't have those kind of limitations, so they can be used interior, exterior, commercial, residential, and a true 100% solids is going to provide the maximum in stain and chemical resistance that you can get.
So if you want something the most bulletproof, you're not going to have to worry about it as much.
Well, and you talked about mix and match. We actually see, in residential applications like a shower floor, where they'll use an epoxy on the shower floor, but they don't necessarily need it on the walls.
Right.
So they'll use one of the other grouts on the walls, and selecting from one manufacturer, your colors are going to be consistent.
It's funny you bring that up, because that's exactly what we did in our shower, and actually it was a requirement based on our floor mosaic size over our foam shower pan to use an epoxy.
Yeah. And in those applications, actually the Ardex WA can be used as the setting material as well, which some foam pans require an epoxy setting material. So WA is also an adhesive as well.
So basically there are solutions for any type of application, and it's best just to have that conversation. And I know that our sales staff relies heavily on training from you guys, so that we can impart that knowledge to all of our customers coming in. We just want to get the best matchup, really. It's not just the color, it's the function, performance.
It's the performance out of it, exactly. That is important, and that's where the salespeople here at CFM are really helpful, because they can understand if you explain to them where this installation is going, they're going to help guide you to make that proper selection.
And again, not an upsell, but more of an education. Let's find what the proper solution is for you.
And today we have a more educated consumer than we've ever had before. People are using the standard cement grouts less and less, and we're going to these improved high performance cements or single components and epoxies, and the epoxies have gotten so much easier to use than they were back in the day when they actually took regular cement grout and added it to epoxy. Those were horrible. But that's where we started, and now we've got water cleanable. You don't have to add any additives. So we really do have some great options available nowadays. And
not just from the homeowner side, but from the installer side too, to put something in that they don't have to worry about as much. It's great insurance, really.
It is. And like I was saying, when we have that educated consumer, if somebody has had tile before, they know that the grout is the maintenance piece. And so, for a nominal, improvement in their grout, it makes their life easier just from a care and maintenance standpoint.
Speaking of some, why don't you tell them a little bit about this little trick, which I don't see very often, but I think because most people still refer to this grout colorant as like an old paint that was garbage back in the day, right?
Yeah, so this is a product, Ardex GCS, it's Grout Color Seal. So what Grout Color Seal does for us is, let's say that we were on a job, and this has actually happened on some of the jobs that I've been on, where you have multiple colors on one job, and accidentally the wires got crossed, miscommunication, and the wrong color was installed in the wrong place. Rather than tear the tile out, rather than scratch out all the grout, we can use Ardex GCS both interior and exterior, so it can go in wet areas as well, and you can actually change a grout joint from light to dark or dark to light. So we can actually go in and recolor and refortify a grout. So it'll work on any cement-based grout. So a great option, one of those things that we use as a solution, just a good thing to know about.
Right.
It's out there.
Yeah, it exists. Well, cool. Now, you mentioned before, it's nice to have those subtle upgrades, because really we're talking a very minimal cost in the overall expense of a tile installation. Right?
It is. We at Ardex, we say that grout is 5% of the overall cost of the installation, but it's 95% of the complaints.
Right.
If someone doesn't complain about their tile, they complain about their grout. So, very inexpensively, they can step up and get a little bit better grout and not have those problems.
Yeah, because I still hear a lot of people, they want the larger format tile, which is certainly on trend.
Less
Specifically,
grout
so they
joints.
have less grout joints. Exactly.
Exactly.
All right. Now, caulking is a big component of any tile installation as well.
Absolutely. And so with caulking, we say sealant because caulking brings to mind, the sanded caulk that everybody is familiar with. But I've got some really good examples of why we would not necessarily want to use a sanded caulk and why we would always want to use a true 100% silicone caulking.
That really seems to be the trend, and obviously it's the only thing that the NTCA, the TCNA, I always get it backwards, specifies, right?
Exactly. And the reason is because of the flexibility. So what I have is two pieces of tile here, and you can see, I've had this for years, bending, and it doesn't break. So this is what a silicone sealant will do. And in fact, I have two examples here. So on the top, we have a sanded caulk, and on the bottom, we have a silicone. And what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to pull and watch what happens. So that sanded caulk breaks, and look at how far that silicone goes before it finally... So we have a better elongation. I can do that one more time so you guys can see. So the sanded caulk is on the bottom, and the silicone is on the top. And see, it breaks right away. But the silicone, it doesn't. So
You got your workout in for the day.
there you go. A lot of times what we find is that contractors don't necessarily know how to use silicone easy.
Show us.
And so I've got some great tips and tricks for doing silicone. And first rule of silicone, don't get silicone where you don't want silicone.
You don't say.
It's true. Now what's nice about the Ardex tube is that it does have the hole already pre-cut. That's important because the first rule is don't get it where you don't want it. So we don't want to cut this thing off any bigger. We want to keep it nice and small. And what I'm going to do is simply apply a nice generous bead. And we want to use silicone at all changes of plane. So these joints should never be grouted. We always want to have a flexible sealant in there. Now my trick is to use a spray glass cleaner. It has to be the spray kind. And what that'll do is I'll be able to spray it on nice and heavy. And now, whether I'm using a silicone cleanup tool or my finger, I can simply go in, get the glass cleaner on my tool. That was pretty quick and easy for a perfect joint every single time. So, just up just like that. Now, if I have to go in and do any touch-up, I can, of course, get a little bit of glass cleaner on my finger, touch up that inside corner, but it's just that easy.
That's pretty simple.
It's pretty simple.
So yeah, even just using, again, because you mentioned a lot of installers are more accustomed to using the sanded or non-sanded caulking.
And the reason
because
why
silicone would get somewhere that they didn't want it, and it was really difficult to get off.
Well, and it would get on their hands, and the acrylic or sanded caulk can simply be cleaned up with a sponge and water. Silicone, you have to either use denatured alcohol, glass cleaner, which is my favorite, but the nice thing is it also doesn't end up on your hands that way.
Right. So let's talk briefly about just the general care and maintenance for grout caulking. What do you suggest?
Basically, grout sweeping and vacuuming is going to take care of cleaning most of your tile. Now, if you do have to get into heavier cleaning, obviously follow the manufacturer's recommendations.
First, yes.
Yeah, they'll always have, whether it's an epoxy, a single component, or a cement base, typically they're always going to recommend a neutral pH cleaner. So most quality care and maintenance products have a neutral pH cleaner. If you have to get into heavy duty cleaning, there are products that can do that as well. And say you got a stain in your grout. What you have to know is, what is that stain? Is it an oil-based stain? Is it an organic stain or inorganic stain? And if you can understand what the stain is, a lot of times we can actually pull stains out of grout, sometimes using things like a poultice or things like that can actually negatively create a negative space that actually draws the stain out of the grout.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just because you get a stain doesn't mean your entire project is
It's not
is
permanent.
lost.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be permanent, and typically it'll clean up.
Awesome.
Yeah.
The beauty of the internet, huh?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. Did we get any questions you want to talk about? Okay, I think we basically ran through all of it.
Yeah.
I want to thank you again for taking the time, and Ardex again is a great partner of ours, and so are all these other ones. I mean, Customs and Laticrete, all your friends in the industry. And
Yeah.
it's nice to see you actually all get along. So there are different products for different applications. There's the wide range of color. Know that it has a huge effect on that overall aesthetic
And impact.
Yes, and then the actual type has a huge impact on the performance. So just make sure that we're matching all those things. Talk to us anytime you have questions. We're happy to help. Again, all of our locations are open. We're fully staffed, and we are ready to get back to it. And it's great to see more faces in here. We still have our remote connection options available if you're more comfortable with that. But again, want to make sure everybody's being safe out there. And we'll look forward to next week. We're actually going to talk about foam shower systems, another newer trend.
Yeah.
Super easy, lightweight, and just incorporating more technology
Faster
into
as
your
well.
Absolutely. So utilize the technology that's out there. Ask us for it, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.